So we talked about how to name point lines and planes, and we talked about how to add parts of a segment to make a whole segment. So today we're going to work on section 1.3, which is the distance and midpoint formulas. We talked a little bit about midpoint last time, about being exactly halfway. Okay, so let's just first start with the distance formula. And so if you have 2 points on an xy plane, that remember we named the points xy. So we have x1, y1, and we have x2, y2. Okay, then you would find the distance by using the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And listen, guys, I know that this looks kind of crazy, but you have to memorize this formula. This will come up again and again and again and again. Okay, so let's do some examples for practice. If I have looking at number 1 here, the first thing I want to do is I want to find out what this point is and find out what this point is so that I can use the formula. Okay, so this first point here is negative 2, negative 3. So in the x direction, I go left 2, and down 3. Okay, so that's how I get that. And for this point, I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and up 1, 2, 3. So that one is going to be the point negative 5, 3. Okay, so it's very, very important after you know the points to go ahead and label them. We always label points x and then y. X and then y. And then you pick one of them to be the first point and one of them to be the second point. So I found this one first, so I'm going to make this the first point and this one the second point. So now do you see how I have an x, a y, an x, and a y? Okay, that's labeled, so I can put that into my formula. All right, so I'm going to now use my formula, and in place of x sub 2, I'm going to use the point that I labeled x sub 2, negative 5, minus, and in place of x sub 1, I'm going to use the point that I labeled x sub 1, negative 2, and I'm going to square that. And then I'll do the same thing for the y's. So y sub 2 first, that's the 3, and y sub 1 second, that's the negative 3 squared. Okay, so then anytime, remember that we have minus a negative, we usually change that to add the opposite. Add the opposite. And so we're going to have this is going to be d equals negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3 squared, and 3 plus 3 is 6 squared. Okay, so that's the square root, negative 3 squared is 9. Any number squared is positive, plus 6 squared is 36. So this is the square root of 45. And you know what? We're just going to leave it like that. You may remember how to simplify square roots, but we're not going to worry about that till next semester. So you can just leave it like the square root of 45. Okay, same thing with number 2. Number 2, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, so then I'm going to use the distance formula, and I'm just going to plug in each of those places. My distance formula says x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I'm going to do negative 1. Oh, just kidding. Okay, how about negative 3 minus negative 4, because that's what I labeled x sub 2 minus x sub 1, and then squared, and then plus y sub 1, y sub 2 is negative 1 minus 1 squared. Okay, so that's going to be negative 3 minus a negative is going to be adding to make 7 squared, and negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2, which will be squared. And so 7 squared is 49, 2 squared is 4, so that is the square root of 53. Number 3, let's do the same thing. I want you to go ahead and label your points and then stop your video and practice using the distance formula all by yourself, and raise your hand when you're done. I'll come around and check it. All right, let's move on to midpoint now. We're still going to have our 2 points, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay? This time I'm going to use the midpoint formula, which is the average of the x's. And the way that we find the average is we add the numbers together and divide by the number of numbers. So there's 2 numbers here. And then y sub 1 plus y sub 2 all over 2. And that's in parentheses because this is talking about a point, and a point is an xy point. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that on number 4. So this is x, I got my eraser, x sub 1, y sub 1. We label our points first, just like we did for distance. And now we'll use midpoint formula. Okay, so remember how we label our points so we don't have to think very much? What's going to go in place of x sub 1? We label that the 7. So that's going to go there. 7 plus, in place of x sub 2, we'll write 9. So 7 plus 9 divided by 2. And then for the y values, we use y sub 1 first, which is negative 5. And we're adding here, don't get it confused with distance when we subtracted, and then add y sub 2, which here is negative 1. Okay, so when I simplify, 7 plus 9 is 16 over 2. Negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6 over 2. So that simplifies. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Okay? So I'm just practicing labeling my points, plugging it in that formula. Go ahead and try to do that on number 5. Then raise your hand and I'll come around and check it. So stop your video and do that number 5 before you move on. Okay, so numbers 6, 7, and 8 are a little bit different. Okay, this one I'm given, oops, sorry, what happened here? I already clicked on the wrong, sorry. So here, I'm given the midpoint and one endpoint, but I have a missing endpoint. So I want to draw this picture, what this kind of looks like over here under finding a missing endpoint. So here I have point A and the midpoint, and I have segment AB, and the midpoint is M. So halfway is M. Okay, so I have 3 points here. I have point A, I have point M, and I have point B. Okay? Point A, I don't know. It says find the coordinates of A. I don't know that one. But M, I know is negative 1, 2. And B is 3, negative 5. Okay, so I want you to picture this. I want you to picture that you are standing on a number line. And you are standing at M. Okay? And you're trying to get to B. So let's look at our X values. If I was at the point negative 1, how many steps would I have to go to get to 3? Okay, I would have to go forward 4 spots. Okay, I would have to go forward 4 spots to get from M to B. Okay, and I know that because negative 1, then I have to go to 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. So that's 4 spots. Okay, so now if I'm still at M and I want to go to A, that means I have to go backwards, right? So I won't add 4 to get to A. I will subtract 4. So negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. That's how we get the X value. Okay, now we can do the same thing with the Y values. If I'm sitting at point M, how many places do I have to go to get to B? Well, if I'm at positive 2, how can I get to negative 5? I have to go backwards. Okay, I have to go 2, 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. So I'm going backwards 7. So if I'm at M, I'm going backwards 7 to get to B. So now if I want to go from M to A with the Y value, I'm not going to go backwards. I'm going to go forwards 7. I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Okay, so 2 plus 7 is 9. Okay, so that's how I'm going to work that problem. So A is at the point -5, 9. All right, let's try another one together. Number 7 says, find the coordinates of J if K is the midpoint of JL and L has this other coordinate. Okay, so what do we got here? We have point J, we have point K, and we have point L. I don't know J. That's what I'm looking for. Okay? I know that K is -5 and 10, -5, 10, and L is -8, 6. Okay? So let me see if I can draw this over to the side again. I've got J, I've got K, and I've got L. Okay, so if I want to go, if I'm on point K, and I want to get to L, if I look at my x values, I'm at -5 and I want to get to -8. So if you're standing on a number line and you're standing at the number -5, you're going to go backwards 3 places to get to -8. So the way that I put that in my, write that is I go backwards 3 places. Okay? So if I'm at K and I have to go backwards to get to L, then I'm going to go forwards to get to J. So I'm going to, instead of going -3 to go the other direction, I'm going to add 3. So -5 plus 3 is -2. Okay, now for the Y values. If I'm standing on point K, the Y value is 10. What will I have to do to get to 6? I would have to go down 4 places, so -4. If I want to go back to J, though, I'm going to have to go in the other direction. So I'm going to add 4 when I go backwards. So 10 plus 4 is 14. So J is at the point -2, 14. Okay, that's kind of tricky. So I want you to go ahead and try, set it up the same way we did here, and try to do number 8 on your own. Raise your hand when you're done, and I'll come around and check. All right, and what would be a lesson in geometry without throwing in some algebra? It would feel so incomplete. I know you feel the same as I do. That would be just terrible, okay? So we're going to go ahead and practice some of these. For number 9, I'm going to use the information I'm given. It says P is the midpoint of XY. So I'm going to draw that. Here I have XY, and P is the midpoint. Now, since P is the midpoint, I know it divides it exactly in half because that's what midpoint means. So I'm going to put my congruence marks there to show that those are equal. And then in the prompt, it says XP is 8x minus 2. So I'm going to label XP 8x minus 2. And it says PY is 12x minus 30. So I'm going to label PY 12x minus 30. And now I got to find x. Okay? And the way I'm going to find x is I'm going to set them equal to each other because I know that midpoint means I divide in 2 equal parts. So 8x minus 2 equals 12x minus 30. So first thing I'm going to do is subtract 8x from both sides to solve that. Bring down my -2, bring down my equal sign. This is 4x minus 30. Add 30 to both sides. This is going to make 28 equals 4x. So 28 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4. X equals 7. So we're using that same information we did in our last section, we talked about midpoints, that midpoints mean it divides into 2 equal parts. Okay, so I'm going to draw this picture again in number 10. It says G is the midpoint of FH. So here I'm going to first draw FH. And then G is the midpoint, so I'm going to draw it in, and I'm going to mark the parts equal because that's what midpoint means, dividing into 2 equal parts. So FG is 14x plus 25, and GH is 73 minus 2x. And we're going to figure out FH, but in order to do that, first we have to find x. So if I just look at the parts with the x, I know they have to be equal because that was a midpoint. So I'm going to set up the equation. 14x plus 25 equals 73 minus 2x. Okay, so first I'm going to combine the x's, and I'm going to move the smaller one. So in this case, that's the 2. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. That'll make 16x plus 25 equals 73. I'm going to subtract 25. 16x equals 48. 16x equals 48. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 16 and get x equals 3. So I go back. In geometry, I always go back. I don't necessarily stop with x. It doesn't say find x. It says find FH. So now I got to plug in that 3. I'm going to start with this FG. 14 times 3 plus 25. That's 42. Plus 25 is 67. Okay, and these should both be the same. Okay, because when you plug in 73 minus 2 times 3, 73 minus 6 is also 67. So when I add those together, FH is going to be 2 times 67, which is 134. All right, I'm going to give you a hint on number 11, and then I want you to finish it on your own and have me check it before I give you your problem set. It says, using the diagram to the left, line N bisects segment QR. What does bisect mean? Bisect means divide into 2 equal parts. So that means this part equals this part. Okay, so I want you to set those 2 expressions equal to each other and then solve. And then plug it in where you're supposed to in order to find QP. All right, great job.